We're with Gresham Bouma, and the first question is, tell me a little bit about why you've decided to run for Senate for the state of Idaho. Are there huge issues that spurred you on?
Yeah, I think probably it's of course related to me being a father and seeing things that I thought jeopardized the future of my children. I feel like we've got a federal government that is pretty much out of control. I think big government and big business are in bed, and they're jeopardizing our future and stealing the liberties that once characterized America. And I just didn't want to see that trend continuing and growing. I felt like it was time that we all here in Idaho needed to become more politically active and become more responsible for the country that we live in.
You say big business and government are in bed. Would that also apply to state government?
Well, I'm not as familiar with what state, what may or may not be going on in state government. If there's corruption at any level hurts the individual citizens, and it's the opposite of the duty of government. The government its duty is to protect the rights of the individual, and when it instead panders to moneyed interests, it's doing the opposite of what it should be doing.
Okay, what do you think of the lawsuit that Shirley Ringo is filing against the State Board of Tax Commissioners? She feels that she's found some corruption between the Tax Commission and politically connected taxpayers.
Well, not being a part of the history that preceded it, I've heard the arguments on one side that was all fully investigated and they found nothing, and apparently she feels like that isn't true. So, I can't really speak directly to that. I think the one thing that does hold true is many of the people who feel like I do, if our own is guilty of something that we despise, we don't defend them. We hold principle and behavior as more important than party. So if there is corruption, it ought to be exposed and eliminated. I don't care who's responsible for it. If there isn't, it's the duty of government to protect individuals from even itself if it's got bureaucracies that are out of control.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about revenue in the state. A lot of people are saying that the state needs to find ways to get more revenue to maintain the services we have. I understand you as a candidate maybe are in favor of smaller government and maybe even less services than we even have now. Maybe you could flesh that out a little bit for me. How much should the state be paying for education, healthcare, parks, and so forth?
Well, that's right. I think revenue is actually a code word for when we want to enhance revenue. We're saying we really need to raise taxes because that's where the revenue comes from. And I think right now to raise taxes on Idaho's businesses would be like burning your furniture to heat your house. Businesses are struggling too much already, and to throw a bigger load on them would further depress business activity, and it would be self-defeating in the long run, because although it might produce, in the house you can heat it for a while with the furniture, but it's not a good long-term plan, and I don't think raising taxes on Idaho's businesses right now would be a very intelligent long-term plan, even if you're primarily concerned about the ability of government to spend.
Okay, I think local option ideas came up during the last candidates forum that I heard. Apparently there's a 2006 law passed by the legislature prohibiting school districts from collecting property taxes for certain things, specifically maintenance and operations. tell me in general how you feel about local option, and then maybe specifically on that issue.
Well, as I noted in the forum, generally I believe that the closer decision making is to the individual citizens, the better. At the same time, as I noted earlier, I think it's a mistake right now to raise taxes, whether you're doing it, statewide or even at the community level. You're going to be hurting businesses that are on the edge of surviving. If a community raises its tax rate, it disproportionately burdens the businesses that become less competitive to the businesses that exist, maybe over the border or in the next town, and so I think there should be. I don't think it should be terribly easy to raise taxes on your neighbor's business. I think that the supermajorities surrounding that process are very necessary, and I think that people should understand what they're doing when they do so. But at the same time, I'm not. I guess because I believe government should be closer to the citizens, I wouldn't try to completely eliminate the ability of a local entity to raise taxes as they do now currently to a large degree. Apparently, they want that ability to be expanded.
Well, let's move to the federal level. You mentioned the federal government maybe being out of hand. Idaho has a lawsuit against the federal government over the federal health care bill. Many states have joined this lawsuit. It's not just an Idaho lawsuit. What's your feelings on that? Should Idaho be spending money to sue the federal government over this?
Actually, I think that Idaho should have asserted their responsibility and told the federal government that Idaho's health care, its insurance industry is and always has been managed by the state of Idaho, that it's part of Idaho's responsibility and not part of the federal government's, and we should have let them sue us. We should have just declared our rights in that area and maintained the high ground and force them to take us to court instead of taking them to court. I feel like that would have been the better route to take there. I think we desperately need free market reforms in health care that put the consumer closer to the purchasing and force more disclosure to the consumer in terms of costs and benefits in modern health care, especially procedures that tend to address chronic diseases, because I feel like it's a part of healthcare that needs a lot of light shown on it.
Okay, we do have a lot of people that don't seem to be able to afford healthcare, and I know there's been a lot of funding cuts in the state health and welfare system. So, do you believe those people should, just go without health care if they can't afford it?
Well, somehow we've got to keep our costs in line without just dumping people, and so I'm not sure how to wean ourselves off of the relationships and the dependency that's been developed and encouraged by government. I think that's a process that has to be engaged carefully, and but if we don't contain costs with free market reforms, they will simply continue to escalate. I believe as they have done for decades, at a rate higher than inflation, and like I said earlier, if we just simply tack more taxes on the private sector, that becomes self-defeating, because you ultimately get less total revenue as you raise rates above a certain level.
Let's move on to the ExxonMobil megaloads and the various other giant loads that three different oil companies now want to move up U.S. Highway 12. They weigh up to 590,000 pounds apiece. There's concern about the integrity for the road, safety, access to the hospitals. Do you think the state should regulate things like this differently, or perhaps not allow that size of loads on that type of highway?
I think we certainly do have to look at some of the details of the regulations that guide Idaho's Transportation Department. We need to make sure that taxpayers do not subsidize these loads in any way. In other words, the cost of escorting them and modifying the road and any costs associated with them moving through should be borne by the company. The road needs to be carefully monitored for any damage, and there has to be insurance and bonding in place to guarantee that if any damage occurs, it's fully borne by the company that caused it. Having said that, I think we also need to recognize that we are desperately dependent on fuels for our very survival, and Canada is probably our best, most stable, and safest source of the fuel that we need to live our daily lives. And I think that we should be friendly to Canada. We should be a good neighbor to Canada and not simply create challenges for them because we don't like oil or are fundamentally opposed to petroleum products themselves. So I certainly want to avoid doing it just despite oil companies or something along those lines. Our oil companies are really the small fries in the energy world. The companies that openly manipulate prices and have really poor safety records belong to OPEC, and our American oil companies are sources of efficiency and creativity and technology in the business, and have very high standards of safety as well. So I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're not the big bad guys in the industry. They're the small fry in the industry.
Okay, well, we're running out of time. I sort of want to ask I guess a general political question about the constituency in Latah County. Now, you won a primary against a 9-term Republican, Gary Schroeder, and I guess there's the perception that people might vote more for the extreme in the primaries and more towards the center in the general elections. Do you think being a Tea Party candidate and so forth is going to hurt you as far as the general electorate in Latah County, made up of independents, equally Democrats and Republicans, it seems?
Yeah, I certainly see the political process at work here. It seems to me that immediately after the primary, my next opponent immediately kind of took up a pro-business rhetoric and snuggled up as close as he could to me from his direction. But I think what really matters is the sincerity, the truth of the message, and the validity of the message. And I don't think my message has changed a whole lot. I no doubt try to phrase it in a way that's persuasive to whomever I'm talking to, but I'm hoping that the truth is what matters to the electorate, and that I can demonstrate genuine policies and ideas, and not just empty rhetoric when it comes to how we should fix the economy, or how we should encourage education reform and improvement, or on any of a number of issues. I feel like people ought to dig deep and find out what's really behind the rhetoric before they make a decision.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about real briefly at the end of this interview?
Well, I would like to say address education itself, because everybody has a pro-education rhetoric, but I would like to point out that that as long as we're willing to let tenure be more important than teacher performance, I don't think a whole lot will change in the classroom, and until we're willing to challenge some of the status quo and shake the bushes a bit, things won't change in education. You can throw more money at it if you want, but if that's the extent of your reform, you're not going to change anything. And indeed, we can't really afford to throw more money at it. So we're going to need to do a better job by making sure that what goes on in the classroom is as good as it possibly can be.